Thank you, Coach, for being with us again. This final chapter of communication talks about being a servant leader.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define the term servant leadership?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think the term servant leadership really sort of tells you. I mean, you serve and you lead. You lead and you serve. But doesn't mean that you have to be in the front of the bus. You could be in the middle, and sometimes the most important servant leaders are at the back. It's like I used to always say when I was selecting a team, the last players that I would pick for my team were sometimes many times were the most important, because their attitude, everything that they did, because they had to give so much of themselves and they never got any glory. Those are the people that was many times the most important, because if they really didn't buy into the success of the team, they could destroy the team from inside. A bad actor, a bad apple can spoil the barrel. So, this to me is like, this is an incredibly important, like they all are. But this chapter, probably has even more meaning to me than maybe it should, but it's very important.
It's an interesting comparison to talk about leadership as being a servant. A lot of times leadership is associated with being in public.
Right.
That you're important if you're in public.
Yeah.
Here, you really stress the importance of getting out in public, but also serving those around you, how it's important to serve people from different places, whether it is in the front in public or not in public,
right.
in other areas. What are some of the factors that might make it difficult for people to act as servant leaders in today's society?
I think the most difficult thing about being a servant leader today is that we live in this world of people want fame, they want fortune, they want to be recognized, they want to be given many times more credit than they really deserve. They want to be able to pound their chest or point to themselves and say it's all about me. The reality is it's not about any one of us, it's all about him. But we get caught into the world and to what we're told and led to believe is important. And then if you dare express an opinion that the majority many times does not agree with, you basically you're banished. It's like you become an outcast. People, if you agree with the majority, then you're okay. If you stand up and you have your opinion that's different, then you can become an outcast. And people want to be liked. So sometimes have convictions that aren't in tune with the majority, then you're put on the outside.
What were some convictions you had in the past that didn't fall in the majority?
I was teaching in high school, at the high school that I graduated from, and I taught there for 17 years. And there came a point in time in my life when I really wanted to venture out. I wanted to leave that comfort zone. I wanted to go into coaching at a higher level, and I was basically, people thought I was absolutely insane. And then, what that also meant was eventually I had to leave the place where I was born and raised. My wife and I had to pack up and, take all of our belongings and move from the Cambridge, Boston area in Massachusetts to Washington, D.C. Family, friends, people I worked with and worked for really couldn't understand and didn't, want to accept the fact that it was time to make a change. So a lot of times there are changes that have to be made that people are not going to really be, happy with. It's also, for example, people perceive you as being just like everybody else, and all of a sudden you discover that you're born again, you're saved, or you believe that there is heaven and hell, and you're bold enough and brave enough, and that you're going to basically share your faith with others, that can be very difficult, and a lot of people don't want to hear it.
I noticed your favorite verse in the beginning of this chapter, and it reminded me about when you told me your trip to Taiwan.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that trip and
Okay.
why you chose that verse.
Well, that trip, first of all, was a really important. It came at such an important time in my life. I was making that conversion, that acceptance conversion. It was right around the time when I accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was born again. And I was given an opportunity. Eric Nelson from Athletes in Action invited me to go and to take a team, to coach a basketball team in the Jones Cup international tournament. Okay, 10 countries all over the world would go to Taiwan to compete for this prestigious cup, amateur cup. So, but it was more than just a basketball trip. It was a mission. It was a mission trip. Not only did we play 10 games in 10 days, but we had 2 and 3 Bible studies every day. So we would study the Word. We spent more time studying the Word than we did practicing for the basketball games. More importantly, we were able to go and really learn more about Christ and about His teaching and about what it meant to share the gospel. And we did that at clinics. In fact, I remember sharing the gospel in front of a packed house one night at a basketball game. I sort of gave my little testimony. And then we went to church one Sunday morning, and the pastor at the church, is a Christian church in Taiwan, and the pastor asked each and every one of us, players and coaches, to get up and give our favorite verse. And I'm going to put my glasses on because I want to make sure that I read every single word. And this is what I didn't have my phone back then, but the verse that I gave was Matthew 5:14-16. And it said, "You are the light of the world, like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and then puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a stand where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." And I read that, and even now I read it again from my phone, and I think about what that really means. And basically what God is telling us is that we're all special. We all have special gifts, that we're not supposed to take our gifts, okay, whether we're leading from the front, the middle, or the back. We're supposed to use those gifts. We're supposed to share those gifts. And we're supposed to let our light shine through those gifts, and not for us, not so that we can tap ourselves on the chest or on the head or whatever and say, "Oh, I'm number one," but so that we can show that God is number one and that we can give Him the glory, okay, and bring honor to Him. Because once again, it's not about us, it's all about Him. So that, to me, as a family man, as a coach, as a team member, and there were a few teams where I might have been the best player. Most teams I was probably one of the worst players, but how important each and every one of us was.
When encouraging servant leaders to let their light shine through their gifts, which strategies would you suggest that maybe have worked for you to make sure that it's not for their glory but for God's glory?
It requires a lot of humility. I remember once one of my players said, "Oh, someday, you're going to be in the Hall of Fame." And what I should have said was, "Well, you know what, if that's God's plan, then you're right, that'll happen." And I said, "You're probably right." And the reality is you I think you got to be humble, and I think you always got to remember that whatever we have, it's on loan. God gave us whatever gifts we have, and those gifts can be taken away just as quickly as they're given to us. And I think we have to realize that we were put here for a purpose other than bigger than ourselves, and that we can be a part of a much better and bigger team if we're willing to submit some of our own wants and needs for the good of the team. You can't really help anybody else if you don't help yourself to be the best that you can be. You got to really feel the pulse, I think, of the people that are around you and that you're supposed to help, and you've got to have compassion, and you've got to have empathy, and you've got to you have to prevent yourself from doing something that I think I've done too often, and that is be judgmental. Who are we to judge? Jesus didn't come to judge us. He came so we could have a relationship with God the Father and with Him. So
that makes sense why it's important to know your gifts, talents, and abilities, humility being a critical key. Of the 7 keys you talk about in this chapter, what would you say has been the most difficult to implement as a coach with your team?
If you're in coaching or if you're in business, you look at the bottom line, you look at the wins and the losses, and you only think about the wins, I think, sometime, because if there's too many losses, you're probably going to get fired. So you're trying to
no pressure.
Not only win, no pressure. You're trying to not only win, but you're trying to survive.
Yeah.
If somehow you can deal with whatever that pressure is that you're dealing with, and realize that there are lessons to be learned from losses, sometimes even more so than wins, and that the only time you lose is when you don't learn. I think to me, that's like so critical, because then you can grow from that, then you can use that. And I think where we suffer, and to answer your question, maybe a little bit more fully, I think sometimes many of us suffer in being consistent. Success, we can get comfortable. And when we start to really be successful, we can be comfortable. And I think sometimes when you get to be comfortable, you have a tendency to once again think that things are just going to happen by themselves. And you forget, what really got you to this place, and you stop being, consistent. I mean, like taking care of the little things all the time. And I think that might be one of the things that we have to really guard against.
It seems like there was a lot of pressure on you as a coach, and a lot of lessons learned or taught in the ESPN documentary. The ESPN documentary is what the students are finishing this week in their course. Tell us a little bit about how servant leadership can be seen in that ESPN documentary.
Well, I see a lot of things in that documentary. I mean, honestly, you can look at it from the lens of sport, but it's really much more than that. It's about team. It's about dealing with life as it really exists, ups and downs and all arounds. It's about conflict, controversy, competition. Those are 3 more C's. Okay, and how a group of people who were not biologically family, but who through the sport had become a member of the same team and the same family, and how they deal with all those things. And yet at the same time, while they're trying to, carve out their own niche and their own identity, how a group of people, and in our case, men and women, because my wife and my family and our managers and all the students in the student body become basically all drawn into this, thick plot. How do we serve one another to make it work? And John Scheinman for example, would be a perfect example of what it means to be a servant leader, because he was a leader. He was a leader in the school, he was a leader in the classroom, and he led from the very end of the bench. I mean, his attitude was so positive. Yeah, he'd be sitting on the bench in Madison Square Garden, but most nights his name would not be called. But he still, every day, he never missed one day of practice, never missed a game, and was cheering louder and harder than anybody.
It was really helpful to see all the work that went behind not only being a good team in public, but also being a good family, like you mentioned, how those team members, although not biologically, became a family, a unit. It's interesting to see, even like you mentioned, the individual stories behind each team player serving not only when needed in front, but more so in the back, and how there's a lot more that goes unseen. That was really, really helpful to see so vividly. It was really, really great.